All right. Hello and welcome to another episode of Let's Discuss. I'm so excited to announce our visitor for this week, Melissa Dumaz. She is a licensed marriage and family therapist, best-selling author, and podcaster. She specializes in guiding clients through the complexities of overcoming trauma, grief, and loss, and improving their relationship satisfaction. Melissa passionately supports high achievers through the everyday stressors of their personal and/or professional lives. As a big advocate for self-care, she weaves that component into her work with all of her clients. Melissa sees clients through her practice, You Help You, where she believes that a healthy you starts with you making new, healthier choices to live your best life. Welcome, Melissa.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited for our conversation today.
I am as well. I am so delighted. I always start my podcast by asking people how we know each other, except in the cases when I slide into DMs, which seems to be happening more often, which is wonderful because more and more people are saying yes. So I love
Absolutely.
that energy already. So much love and information to share and spread. So we know each other because I follow you on Instagram. And I thought, specifically, had been speaking a lot on sharing, taking up space, and you did a post, and I was like, that's my cue from the universe. I'm going to ask Melissa to reach out. So that's how we know each other. So yeah, and I wanted to just get started kind of when I have a professional and I like to ask, how did you get into the field?
Oh, great question. Let's see, is it the long answer or the short answer?
Well, as much time as you'd like.
I'll give the in-between answer. So the in-between
Sure.
answer is that I come from a family of helpers, from teachers to nurses to home care providers and so on, and from a family of givers. And so going into school, I knew that I wanted to do something in the helping or teaching field. I actually considered at one point being a teacher. I considered when I went into undergrad, my major was pre-med. I wanted to be a pediatrician.
Yes.
And then I took a psychology class in my sophomore year and was like, ooh, I love this topic. I was so excited to learn about psychology and the psyche and how it works. And during that course, the professor had, at the time, was called Marriage, Family, Child Counselor, MFCC, to come and speak to the class. And so I reached out to her at a later time and just interviewed her over lunch, asked her about her field, what would it take for me to enter into the field? And then I was sold. I was like, that's what I want to do. That's what I want to do. I want to be a therapist. And then I shared that with my family. And of course, my mom was like, well, can we still call you doctor? And I was like, well, no, not really. Not unless I go get at the time there was no PsyD, but I said, not unless I go get like a doctorate degree, then I could be doctor. I was like, maybe one day, but that's not the focus. And so here I am. And, every day that I do this work and each client that I see, it's a reminder of I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. It's a reminder of like the intersect between purpose and passion. And it's also a reminder to even the things that I've experienced in my own life. When you have those moments, you're like, well, why did that happen? And how come that happened? And then when clients share similar stories, just the level of compassion that you have for them, knowing that like, oh yeah, I've heard this before. Oh yeah, I know that journey myself.
Yeah, absolutely. And it is nice to be able to have that ability to normalize for people and say, because a lot of times when people come to meet with us, they're like, I'm other, I'm crazy. I can't stand when people use that, but they're like, well, I'm obviously crazy because this is happening. I'm like, interestingly enough, you are not alone.
Right. Absolutely.
Nice space to be able to do that. And that's so great. So, and then obviously I just read your bio and talking about kind of overcoming trauma, grief, and loss. How is it that you kind of, I don't want to say specialized, but how did you kind of come to be more in tune with that area?
Meg, you made a statement earlier and you said you saw my post about take up space and that was your cue from the universe that you needed to reach out to me. I am a fan of keys and clues from the universe as well. I did not consider trauma or grief and loss or the particular niche that I'm in when I first went into the field. And I would even say to my mentor, like, I don't know what client I want to work with. Like, I don't have a niche. And he would say, that's okay. Just keep seeing clients. And when the time comes, you will know what resonates with you. And so I took heed to that, saw any and every type of client that I could get my hand on to get experience, from school-based to working in a mental health hospital, to doing home-based, to working at nonprofits, working in private practices. just everything, so that I could really work in a group home, so that I knew exactly what I wanted to do. And then one nonprofit I worked for, they trained a specific group of us in trauma focused cognitive behavioral therapy. And that particular nonprofit did have a lot of children that had experienced abuse and, of course, grief and loss, since they were separated from their family of origin, living in foster care. And when I went to that training, I learned so much more about trauma than I realized that I didn't know. I was doing the work, but didn't really have any formal training other than what we got in grad school and the experience being on the job. And so this really provided a framework of how I could work with these clients and do more than just being present and sitting with them in their pain. Like, it gave me some, in a sense, some to-dos, like, okay, this is how this works. This is how you create the treatment plan. And I was in awe. And when I started implementing that format into my sessions and just seeing the progress that they would make, it resonated with me more and more. And I was like, oh, this is what I want to do. This is what I want to do. And so here I am now, many years later, continuing to do the trauma work. I also provide EMDR with my clients. I'm fully trained in EMDR, which I absolutely love.
Yes, wonderful.
It's like game changer. I've been using it for the last 2 years, and it's been a game changer in my practice and a game changer in the clients that I see. And it's like, what took me so long to get here? But that's how I landed here. And at that time, like I said, I took the cue from the universe, not really realizing the parallel to my own life. And then once, I did more of my own work in therapy and doing more of the work with clients, I saw so much parallel, like, oh yeah, I get why I'm a trauma therapist. I get why I also focus on grief and loss. And I get why I advocate for self-care, because, there are some places in my life where I have walked some of those journeys. And I've also come to learn that, I don't know if this is true based on like research, but in my mind, based on some of the therapists that I know in their niche, like, I've come to learn that some therapists choose a niche based on like their own experience, their own personal experience, and sometimes not even knowingly, which was my case, not even knowingly. It's just like, oh, I picked that. It was like, no, you picked that for a reason. It didn't just happen. And so again, the more and more I do the work, the more and more it resonates with me that I'm exactly where I should be.
Oh, I love to hear that. And it is interesting. I actually had a consultation with one of so I do, again, I don't like the word specialized because I'm not all knowing, but I do focus on perinatal mental health. And we have a provider here who's been doing it for over 2 decades now here in the area. And I had a consultation with her, just, always good to learn and, rub up against somebody sharper, right? And we were talking about that, right? Like, how often I think it's like 62% of people in perinatal have their own pregnancy crisis or pregnancy loss situations. And it's interesting how the things that impact us, whether or not we're observing it, like, oh, this happened to me, I'm going to go here. It's not often a very straight line like that.
Yeah, exactly.
And then we kind of ease our way into it or find our way into it, or the universe guides us there. And absolutely. That's so wonderful. And I think EMDR is so wonderful. I actually did one of my grad school assignments was on EMDR, and I've always found it to be terribly fascinating. So I love to hear everyone's experiences in that as well.
Oh yeah. When people ask me how I enjoyed the training and how I enjoy using the work, I tell them I drank all the Kool-Aid. Like, I went to the training, I drank all the Kool-Aid, I use it, like, I'm so into the research, and it's just so powerful. And the shift that you see in clients, it's like, it's mind blowing. Like, and it never gets old. Like I said, I've only been doing it for a couple of years, but it never gets old seeing clients come out to the other side in sessions versus years, of work. It's so powerful.
So lovely. Absolutely. I love to hear that. So I wanted to talk about kind of, again, what was the spark that was like, hi, Melissa, I'm Meg. I wanted to talk about taking up space, because I feel like, and there's so many levels of this, right? So many levels that I can't relate to, that I can relate to, of I've been talking to a lot of clients about like why we deserve the seat at the table, why we're allowed to express ourselves and hold people accountable in our lives to being able to support us. And of course, we want to be that for the other people as well and allow them to take up space. And I was curious for you, what does that mean to you? What does that look like for you, the taking up space conversation?
Right. For me, it's layered. And I'll walk through those layers. Part of it is, based on my experience working with, high achievers who don't make the time for themselves.
Yes.
So it's like, okay, you have to take up some space. You have to put yourself on your calendar. You have to be able to say, no, I can't do that extra project. I can't,
Mhm.
rather than being in this position where you're continuing to take on more and more, or people are continuing to take from you and you not taking the time to pour back into yourself. And so
Mhm.
there's the take up space, meaning take the time to take care of yourself, make time for you, and be okay with saying, I can't do that because I have an appointment with me. And that's
Right.
how you take up space for yourself. The other layer to it is working with clients that have been impacted by trauma, and I know that's something that you work with as well, Meg. So I'm sure you may have heard of or recognize that a lot of times when clients have been traumatized or experienced trauma, or they're a trauma survivor, they tend to hide themselves.
Mhm.
They tend, and that hide sometimes come from, well, this is how I've learned to protect myself. This is how I've
Yes.
learned to keep myself safe. It's not okay for me to be vulnerable. And so they
Mhm.
may show up into a room, literally, or into a meeting and sit in the back and try to hide themselves, when within them there's so much beauty and so many gifts that they have, that the world is ready to see, and that I would, want them to be able to share that with the world, because in sharing parts of them also helps them to re-enter into the world and to know, like, it can be a safe place. Or re-entering into the world, we can find safe places in people, even though other people have made us feel unsafe. And so positioning them to not be afraid to take up space and ask for what they need, not be afraid to take up space and set those boundaries and say, I'm not okay with that,
Mhm.
boundaries with themselves and other people, and not being afraid to take up space and to say, like, yes, this happened to you, but you don't have to hide who you are.
Mm.
This is your caterpillar season to transform, to go from caterpillar to butterfly, to have your metamorphosis. And in order to show your wings, you have to take up space and to be able to show yourself.
Oh, I love that. Absolutely. Because I going back to what you're talking about, the kind of the high achiever, the can't ever say no. Everyone is depending on me. If
Mhm.
I don't do it, no one can. It
Right.
won't get done. I see a lot of that too, especially in my area, more on the parenting side, right?
Mhm.
Of struggling to allow other people in,
Right.
um, for fear of just all of the fears that we have, like you mentioned, it's so interesting, like hiding yourself, on the opposite side of that, from one of the opposite side, I don't know why I use the word opposite, but on another side of that, of the trauma piece. And if I just sit here quietly, then people can't hurt me again. And if
Mhm. Mhm.
I sit um and so that's really great, finding that space of being like, how can we protect ourselves? What boundaries can we put in place?
Right.
And also live.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. To live, and not even just live, because clearly, as trauma survivors, they've survived for so long. So yes, we want to get them to a place where they're no longer just doing things to survive, but where they're living, but ultimately to thrive, to
Right.
thrive. And in order to thrive, we have to take up space. We have to be able to spread our
Mm,
wings.
mm,
But the last layer for me in the take up space, as I mentioned, that it was multi-layered for me, is the take up space, being a Black woman, being a
mm.
woman of color,
Yes.
and being in the field that is predominantly not Black,
Right.
or walking into meetings or walking into networking events, or
Mm,
anywhere, and being the one, Black
right.
person in the room, or the one Black woman in the room. And so
Mhm.
reminding myself, even personally, like, even though I'm the only one in the room and I can see that, but I'm here for a reason. I'm allowed to be at this table. I've done the hard work to be at the table, and I'm going to take up space because I have something that is valuable to share. I have wisdom, I have ideas. And so to dim my own light is doing myself a disservice. And
Right.
so, reminding myself to take up space in whatever space that I'm in as well.
Right. Absolutely. And I appreciate you sharing that. And that's so true too. Again, all of those layers, and they all interact with each other in different ways for each individual person. And it, talking about, like, if they don't have a seat at the table for you, bring your own chair, right?
Right.
And it's difficult for some people to feel empowered that they are in fact allowed to do that. I don't like to use the word aloud, but I actually
Yeah.
have clients, we talk about seeking permission from somebody
Right.
to be able to do it.
Yes.
And it is a difference between surviving and thriving. Of course, we
Mhm.
talk about, from victim to survivor to thriver, and victim is a very interesting word, but there actually are trainings on that.
Yeah.
And getting to that space where it's not just getting through the day, it's enjoying, it's creating, it's participating.
Yeah. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Yeah. And making
Yeah.
time for fun. Making time for
Yes.
fun and laughing, and just how much joy that brings in you. And even, us sitting here having this conversation that can be a heavy topic, finding the light in it and still being able to smile and to experience the joy of life.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Absolutely. And I love the metaphor, the butterfly, the caterpillar and butterfly metaphor, right? And it's a very visual observation of like, we all know what that looks like. We learned that in, I don't know what grade you learned that in
Second
science.
grade, first grade or second grade. Yeah.
Metamorphosis, pretty young.
Yeah.
And it's a visual and concrete way of looking at that, of like, I am changing
Absolutely.
from who I was to who I can be, who I would like to be.
Right.
And again, it's taking up that space. It's being able to say, I'm here and I'm going to participate. And I've talked about this a lot, but that boundary piece of like, no one likes boundaries. They're terrible. You don't like to tell someone they can't do something when they've been doing it. They're hard to maintain. No one likes to be told that someone doesn't like something about them, but it's not so much, I don't want you to do something because I don't like you, or you are a terrible person. It's, I want to be in your life.
Yeah.
And I need this to happen to feel comfortable to do so.
Right. Right.
Yes.
Right. Absolutely. And I would even say that I have a difference of opinion. I believe that it's not that people don't like boundaries.
Sure.
I think people like boundaries. I think that people don't like to set or to receive boundaries.
Right.
And I'll be honest, like, I am a fan of boundaries. I'm like Oprah when it comes to boundaries. Like, you get a boundary, you get a boundary. And I tell my clients that too, like, pass those boundaries out like candy.
Yes.
But even though I've been doing this for years, it is uncomfortable to set a boundary. Yes. And that's the truth, to be able to, especially, for those that are trauma survivors, to be able to stand up for yourself and to say, I don't like that. I don't appreciate when you, or I need this time in this space for me, having to take up that space and ask for what you need can be uncomfortable. And so it's pushing through the discomfort so that you can really get what it is that you need.
Yes. And I appreciate you clarifying that, because what I mean, I actually love the Oprah thing too, of like, everyone gets boundaries. I mean, I have not experienced someone who's like, I love telling people that they can't do that. Like the action of boundaries,
right. Exactly.
Existence, right? The implementation, the maintaining, the work that goes into it. Absolutely correct. Yes. But they're so vital. They're so necessary. And I think it's so individualized too, at figuring out, especially in a situation where you have felt so uncomfortable or belittled or demeaned or othered for so long, of like, what do I even need to feel comfortable in this space? And that there's no one specific, do this checklist and here's what you do.
Exactly.
And then it's figuring out how to implement and how to maintain those moving forward. And take, again, we're bringing it back again and taking up that space, right?
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. You have to take up that space, and boundaries help you to do that, because even when we think about like physically, like our space, like in order for me to maintain my space, there has to be a boundary, and we've all been living in this pandemic, and some of that boundary for all of us has been, give me my 6 feet, and so when we think about 6 feet, like that's a boundary. And when people, are in the grocery store next to us, it's like, hey ma'am, can you step back on the line? Like, you're in my 6 feet space.
Sure.
And so that is how we're taking up space and setting boundaries at the same time.
Yes, and that's another one. We've gotten very accustomed to physical boundaries, where and there is that thing where I think I've just seen different exercises where it's like team building exercises or whatever, where you say like, stand as far apart as you both feel comfortable, and like one person keeps
Oh,
moving,
yes,
but one
yes.
person, right? And
Mhm.
it's like, and so everyone's is different. It's just knowing what yours is and being able to express that.
Right,
Yeah.
absolutely, yeah, and such a valid point because I too have seen that team building, and I've seen it go the other way where stand as close as you can.
Uh-huh.
Some people are just like, "All right, that's close
Can't,
enough," whereas other
can't do
people
it.
can like walk right up on you and be like, "I'm fine being here," and you're like, "Whoa, that's a little too close."
Yes, yes, absolutely. I have absolutely felt that myself. And I recognize that myself too, of like, so my physical boundaries are a little bit farther apart. And some people, that's fine.
Yeah,
Yeah. And it is even so far, obviously, I do telehealth. And so it's been interesting to be back in physical spaces with people as we start to kind of re-enter the world a little,
yes,
and recognizing, I think I used to sit closer to people than
yes,
this.
yes. So true. Yeah. I've
Yeah,
been enjoying
absolutely.
the 6 feet distance in the grocery store line or, in any line. And so
Mhm.
now when people, since, stores no longer have the markers and things like that on the
Right.
ground. So now when people are closer, like I get a little antsy, like, we're not doing 6 feet anymore. I'm
Uh-huh,
like, I want my 6 feet.
uh-huh. I was
Right. Perfectly
okay
fine.
with that. Absolutely. Yes. So I was curious, kind of course, understanding all humans are so unique and so different in their journeys, but what are some of the kind of common things that you've noticed? We talked about like making healthier choices, recognizing we aren't being our healthiest selves. What are some kind of common themes that you've been noticing in your practice?
When it comes to recognizing we're not being our healthiest self, usually it comes with some sort of complaint, whether it's like, I just don't feel good, or my mood, or in some cases with the high achieving or even overachieving clients that I see, like, usually I could work harder and longer and better, and I'm not able to, and I don't know what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
So that is a complaint. Sometimes it comes up in relationship, like I'm not happy in my relationship. One of the biggest ones that I see with my population is um, I'm in a certain space. I've been here for a while, and I want to grow and move past this, or do better and bigger. And I feel like there's something that I'm missing. Like I've done all the things that I know how to do. Now I'm
Mm-hmm.
reaching out because I feel like there's something missing. So that comes up. And
Ah,
then also what comes up is just this naming of experiences, but not the naming of actually what it is. And then, so I'll give you an example. I've had clients come in with stomach complaints or headache complaints,
mm,
um, like sweaty palms, or just feeling
sure.
like discomfort in their belly or butterflies.
Mhm.
And then when we start looking at, well, let's define anxiety. What is let's define what that is and how it shows up in people's lives, or let's define what depression is and how that shows up in people's lives. There's just like these light bulb moments, like, oh my gosh, I have anxiety. I never would have thought that I have anxiety. And even
Mhm.
that, concern of like being able to accept that or receive it. Like it
Mhm.
doesn't mean there's anything wrong with you. Like anxiety is a normal emotion, just like anything else. Some people have more of it than others.
Right,
It doesn't mean that you're now, quote, diagnosable. And even
right.
if you are, then like that gives us a framework as to
Mm,
what's going on.
yes.
And sometimes even just bringing clients out of the dark to what they've been experiencing and shining some light on it is healing within itself, being able to put a
Mhm.
name on it, because people want to understand. They want to understand themselves. They want to understand what they're experiencing, which is why they come to a professional, to be able to get that framework. And when they have that understanding, as you mentioned early on at the beginning of our discussion, Meg, it's like, oh, so I'm not weird. I'm not the outlier. I'm not the only one. I'm not, quote, crazy. Like, no,
Uh-huh.
you're not. Like, this is what it is. And
Right.
people who have this thing or these symptoms, this is what life can look like for them. So that's a big piece of it, is naming it and being able to define what their experience is and how much empowerment that gives them, knowing like, oh, this is what it is. Okay, now let me
Right.
figure out how to manage this.
Yes. Wonderful. Yeah. I love that idea too of like, I'm recognizing something. I like how you mentioned like either there's a complaint, something's not working anymore, or, and I guess I've never really thought about this, but kind of like reaching a plateau. Like I
Mhm.
can't, things are fine, and I'm used to being able to keep pushing and going up, and I'm not able to reach that next level and that next level as I had. I mean, of course, and that recognizing that and having
Right.
those conversations, naming it, owning it, being able to move forward, and then being able to make those healthier choices. My mind keeps coming back to kind of the overachieving, high achievement. Overachieving kind of comes with a negative connotation. High achieving individuals, and being able to say, like, your worth is not based on your salary zeros and your letters behind your name and whatever else it might be. And it's very hard for some people to turn that off. And so that's why it's nice to be able to have conversations like these where we can say, like, have you put in your calendar a moment for yourself?
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. Yes. Yes. And I tell clients all the time, like, put it on your calendar. And when someone calls you and says, hey, are you available for lunch? You can look on your calendar. And if it says resting on the couch doing nothing with myself, you're not available. Tell them you have an appointment. They don't have to know who the appointment is with.
Nope.
I'm unavailable, or I already have a meeting scheduled at that time. And guess what? That meeting is with yourself.
Absolutely.
And be okay with that.
Yeah.
And back to your question about, the what people can do as far as like living a healthier lifestyle and what that looks like. I'm a big fan of starting where we are and starting with the tools that we have. And so first, let's look in your toolbox and see, what are you currently doing? And as we do an inventory on that, let's look at what's working. Are these things working? You say you get up in the morning and you go work out. Is that helpful? Is it unhelpful? You say that you go spend time with friends, but in the last session, I heard you complaining about this group of friends that they only gossip. So is that a helpful outlet for you? If you're spending time with them, but you're only being filled up with what you don't want, which is gossip. Right. And so we do an inventory about what they're currently doing for self-care, for fun, or for their healthy lifestyle. And then we start to weed out what's not working and then replace it with some healthier tools. I'm a big fan of body movement. As you said, you follow me on Instagram. So if you do, literally, you'll see me post every day, like some sort of like workout or body movement, because I'm a big fan of that. Like, movement is medicine, and people forget about that, just how, even if it's just a walk or getting out into nature, moving your body, stretching, there's so much that we store in our body. And if we could move our body, then we can help to release some of that. And then of course, get those happy hormones going to help to boost our mood and to manage our anxiety.
Oh my gosh, absolutely. Movement is medicine. I love that. Absolutely. And I love going back to what you're talking about like, oh, I'm checking the box because I'm being social and I'm out. And it's like, right, but are you being intentional about what you're doing? Like, how are you spending? Okay, so I've set an hour, I'm out, so I've done it. And it's like, but you talked about how miserable you were.
Exactly, right.
Or in some level of emotion, that's not the positive, right? And so it's being intentional about like, yes, you've checked the box of not isolating. And was it fruitful? And was it refilling your cup in some way? Or was it just literally checking a box? Like, I was in the same space as other humans.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. I did the thing. Okay. What more do you want from me?
Exactly. And then I also, you brought it up and I wanted to talk about, like, I feel like there's a movement for rest culture. Because you mentioned like my 12 o'clock is me sitting on the couch doing nothing, or watching my favorite TV show, or reading a book that has nothing to do with work, right? And I feel like there's a movement. I feel like I'm hearing people talk about it, because we did used to be weekend warriors and nighttime, and like, how many hours can I put in, and how much sacrifice, and how miserable can I make myself? But look at me, I'm making all of it. Like, and that was kind of what we felt was accomplishing. And so I think now I'm hoping that we're continuing as therapists and as humans, spreading the word that it's okay to relax.
Yes, okay. Absolutely. Yeah. And I love it, because I am not a fan of like hustle culture, grind culture. Like, when you look up in a definition what grinding means like working it down to nothing. Like, no, I don't want to grind. I don't want to live that life. And so
oh my gosh, yes.
Encourage my clients, like just think about this, like, and also I am a big fan of words and word choice, like being mindful of our words. Like, if you're saying you're grinding, like, let's talk about what that really means. And is that really what you're doing? And they're like, no, like, I don't want to work myself down to nothing. Well, let's not use that word. Let's not use that word.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, absolutely. Well, Melissa, I want to thank you so much for taking the time to come in. I appreciate you responding to my random message on Instagram. But I love that about social media now, is that we're able to just expand our networks this way. So where can everybody find you?
Well, everyone can find me. I spend most of my social media time on Instagram.
Mhm,
My handle is my first name and my last name, which is Melissa, one L, two S's, and then my last name is Dumaz, Dumaz.
mhm.
Even if you click there in my bio, it'll lead you to my private practice page. It'll lead you to my podcast page. My
Yes,
podcast is called the Hats Podcast,
yes.
where we help busy people to manage all of the hats that they wear every day and to find balance in that. You can also find my book, The Love Challenge, on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, and on my website. But that's me. I'm everywhere online on social media, but Instagram is where I spend most of my social media real estate.
Amazing. And actually, I was so glad that you brought up, I was going to put it in the show notes either way, but the hat, I just thought that was the most clever. I just thought it was so clever. The hat, how to manage all the hats, because that is also very common metaphor. So
Yeah.
love it. And then of course, checking out the Love Challenge, anywhere where fine books are sold, right?
Yes, thank you.
Well, Melissa, again, thank you so much for the time. Thank you for speaking to the audience. It's been such a pleasure, and I'm so grateful for the opportunity to get to connect.
Yes, thank you for having me. Thank you for sliding into my DMs,
Yes.
and I appreciate it. Enjoy your day.
Thanks. Thank you. And to everyone out there, remember, be curious, not judgmental. Make it a good one.